The roar of artillery shook the sky, reverberating through the narrow streets and surrounding hills, as though the heavens themselves were warning of the fury below. Smoke from burning buildings clawed upward, twisting and turning with the wind, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to mock the chaos on the ground. The distant echo of gunfire, the clatter of tanks' tracks against rubble-strewn roads, and the low, ominous hum of airplanes circling above created a symphony of war that penetrated every corner of Eisenhower's temporary headquarters. Each sound seemed amplified by the tension in the room, making every officer acutely aware that even a single wrong order could cost thousands of lives. Patton stormed into the room like a force of nature himself, his polished boots striking the floor with a decisive authority that demanded attention. Mud streaked his uniform, evidence of his relentless advance through the German front, and his eyes blazed with that familiar mix of audacity and impatience, the kind of fire that had made him legendary, feared by enemies and admired, even begrudgingly, by allies. He scanned the room, which was thick with the quiet hum of strategic minds at work, and let out a sharp bark. "General!" His voice cut through the tension like a sword through silk, and every officer in the room turned instinctively, some flinching at the raw intensity of his presence. "I want this city back. I can take it in 3 days." The city he referred to lay ahead, a jewel of strategic importance in the heart of Germany, currently under German occupation. Patton's eyes weren't just fixed on the buildings or streets. They were fixed on the idea of victory, on the chance to strike a decisive blow that could cripple the enemy's hold in the region. It wasn't just a military objective for him. It was an opportunity to assert dominance, to etch his name into the annals of history. He gestured sharply toward the large map sprawled across the table, pointing at the city as though willing it to fall with the strength of his conviction alone. Eisenhower, seated behind a desk cluttered with maps, reports, and telegraphs, remained calm, almost impossibly so. His fingers were steepled beneath his chin, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as he considered Patton's audacious declaration. Around him, aides and officers froze, waiting for his response. They all knew Patton was a whirlwind of energy and daring, but even they understood that acting without careful thought could tip the scales from triumph to disaster in mere hours. Eisenhower's experience, his methodical mind, weighed heavily against Patton's raw momentum, and the room seemed to hold its breath as the two forces of personality collided silently. Patton moved closer, the muscles in his jaw taut, the veins in his neck standing out as his excitement mingled with frustration. He slammed his fist against the map, the sound sharp enough to startle several of the officers, and leaned forward so that his face was inches from Eisenhower's. "Look at it," he growled. "It's ripe for the taking. The Germans are weak here. They don't know we're ready. If we move fast, we can catch them completely off guard. 3 days and it's ours. I can feel it." Eisenhower's eyes followed Patton's finger, tracing the routes of attack and the potential choke points where German forces could regroup. There was truth in Patton's words. Intelligence reports had indicated vulnerabilities, and his instincts were almost always correct when it came to sensing the enemy's weaknesses. Yet Eisenhower also knew that war was rarely as simple as speed and audacity alone. There were supply lines to consider, reinforcements to coordinate, and the unpredictable chaos of combat itself. The man before him was a storm, but storms could be beautiful and devastating in equal measure. The question was whether this one could be controlled, or whether it would spiral into calamity. The silence that followed was heavy. Officers exchanged glances, some leaning in to see how Eisenhower would respond, others gripping their notebooks and pens, ready to record orders and calculations. Outside the headquarters, the distant rumble of tanks could be heard moving forward, and the sharp crack of rifles reminded everyone present that lives hung in the balance with every decision made inside these walls. Patton's impatience was a living thing in the room. He leaned even closer, eyes locked on Eisenhower's, and spoke with a conviction that could have moved mountains. "We can't wait," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Every hour we delay, the Germans fortify. Every day we hesitate, they gather strength. If we strike now while they're still disorganized, we can take the city with minimal losses on our side and maximum shock to theirs. We have the momentum, Dwight, the momentum." Eisenhower's expression did not change, but his mind was a whirlpool of calculations, probabilities, and contingencies. He considered the reports he had received that morning, the movements of Allied divisions to the north, and the intelligence on German reinforcements that could arrive if the assault went poorly. Every officer in the room knew the answer hinged not on courage, but on careful orchestration, and Eisenhower had spent his entire career balancing the two. He understood that Patton's style was audacious, often reckless, but undeniably effective. The question was whether he could harness that energy in a way that did not become catastrophic. Patton slammed his helmet onto the table, the noise reverberating across the room and drawing startled gasps from the aides. 3 days, he shouted. "We can do it in 3 days. I've done it before and I'll do it again. I've led men through worse odds and come out victorious. We either move now or watch this opportunity slip away into the hands of the enemy." Eisenhower leaned back, his eyes never leaving Patton's, the weight of command pressing down like an invisible hand on his shoulders. "George," he began slowly, the use of Patton's first name a deliberate choice to emphasize the seriousness of his next words, "I admire your spirit. You always see opportunity where others see danger. That fire of yours has won battles and saved lives. But understand this. War is not just about speed or surprise. It's about control, logistics, and the lives of thousands of men, not just the glory of a city." Patton's expression flickered, a mix of frustration and disbelief crossing his face. "Control?" he barked. "We have control. Speed is control. Delay, and the Germans regroup. We strike now, we crush them completely. You can't tell me caution. We'll win this battle." Eisenhower raised a hand, not in surrender, but in emphasis, his voice calm yet commanding. "I am not denying your instincts, George. They are unmatched. But there is more at stake here than the capture of a single city. Think of supply lines, reinforcements, the civilians caught in the crossfire, a rush without. Preparation could lead to unnecessary loss of life, which I will not condone. Your audacity is a weapon, but it must be wielded wisely." Patton's fists clenched, his jaw working as he tried to reconcile his desire for immediate action with the heavy hand of strategic caution laid before him. He had never been a man to wait, to calculate every variable, yet he respected Eisenhower's mind even as it seemed to slow the relentless pace at which he wished to move. The room seemed to contract, the air thick with the tension of two extraordinary military minds measuring each other, both aware that the decisions made in these moments could alter the course of the war. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Eisenhower spoke again, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of command. "We will consider your plan, George, but understand that if we act, it will be under a coordinated strategy. You will lead the assault, yes, but it will not be uncontrolled. Your brilliance must be channeled into a plan that protects your men as much as it punishes the enemy. The glory is yours, but so is the responsibility." Patton's eyes flashed with a combination of exhilaration and acceptance. He knew that Eisenhower was right, that untempered audacity could destroy even the best-laid plans. Yet he could feel the fire within him ignite at the thought of leading a charge, of reclaiming a city from the enemy's grasp, and proving once more why he was feared and respected in equal measure. He straightened, the energy in his posture almost palpable, and nodded. "Responsibility is nothing new, sir. I take it every time I ride into battle. The men trust me, and I will lead them as I always have, fast, fearless, and focused." Eisenhower allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. In Patton's intensity, he saw the essence of what made the man remarkable: courage, instinct, and an unyielding determination to act. And though he knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, he also knew that when guided correctly, Patton's audacity could achieve the impossible. Outside, the rumble of tanks and distant gunfire continued, a relentless reminder that the war would not wait. Inside, a storm of strategy, personality, and raw ambition swirled, setting the stage for a decision that would echo through history. In those tense moments, the clash of two extraordinary minds, one fueled by daring, the other by careful calculation, would determine the fate of a city, the lives of thousands, and the unfolding of a war that demanded both courage and wisdom. The room fell into a heavy silence after Patton's explosive declaration. The officers around Eisenhower felt the weight of the moment, pressing down like the leaden clouds outside. The distant echo of artillery reminded them that every second wasted in deliberation could cost lives. Yet inside, two extraordinary minds clashed over the same battlefield from opposite ends of the spectrum, one driven by raw audacity, the other tempered by the patience of experience. Eisenhower leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table, hands interlocked as his eyes scanned the map that had become the focus of every officer in the room. The city that Patton was so determined to reclaim lay ahead like a prize waiting to be seized. And it was indeed vulnerable. Reports indicated disarray among German troops, intelligence had revealed weak points along the city's perimeters, and reconnaissance had mapped routes that could allow for a rapid advance. Yet Eisenhower saw the complexity behind these numbers and lines. War was never just about opportunity. It was about timing, coordination, logistics, and, above all, the human cost. "George," Eisenhower began, his voice low but firm, carrying both authority and the weight of careful consideration, "I admire your spirit. I truly do. You always see opportunities where others see only danger. That fire of yours has inspired men and turned the tide in countless engagements." His eyes met Patton's, a mixture of respect and caution shining in their depths. "But this is not just about speed or momentum. Taking a city is far more complicated than simply reaching its gates. What comes after? Who holds it? How do we supply our men? How do we ensure that civilians are protected?" Patton's jaw tightened. His eyes flashed with disbelief and frustration, as though Eisenhower's words were chains attempting to restrain the very essence of his being. "Control?" he barked, slamming his fist against the edge of the table for emphasis. "We have momentum. Speed is control. Delay for a single hour, and the Germans fortify. Delay a single day, and the opportunity slips away. We strike now while they are still disorganized. That's control. The clock is ticking, Dwight, and hesitation is as deadly as any bullet." Eisenhower remained calm, his hands resting lightly on the map. He knew Patton's style, knew that his impatience was born not of recklessness, but of a deep-seated understanding of war's fluidity. He also knew that unchecked, it could spiral into disaster. "I do not deny your instincts, George. They are almost always correct, and they have saved lives and won battles when logic alone would have condemned us. But the war is more than instinct. It is coordination, supply, and foresight. A city is more than buildings and streets. It is people, infrastructure, and the potential for counterattack. Every move we make has consequences." Patton leaned closer, almost pressing his forehead against Eisenhower's, his voice dropping to a growl that carried both intensity and conviction. "Consequences, yes, but we know the cost of hesitation. Thousands of men will die if we do not act. The Germans will regroup, reinforce, and then we will face months of grinding battle. I've led men through worse odds, and we succeeded because we moved, not because we hesitated." Eisenhower nodded slowly, acknowledging Patton's point without conceding the argument. I am aware, George, and I do not underestimate your brilliance or your courage. But this is not just about what you can do, it is about what we can do together. I need to ensure that when we act in a way that maximizes success while minimizing loss. That is my duty as a commander. The room was tense, charged with energy. Officers shifted in their chairs, glancing at one another nervously. They had seen these clashes before, the dynamic between Patton's relentless drive and Eisenhower's meticulous calculation, but never had the stakes felt so high. Outside, the distant rumble of artillery and the whistle of shells through the air punctuated the conversation, a grim reminder that every word, every pause, could mean life or death for thousands. Patton's frustration boiled over. He slammed his helmet onto the table, the sound echoing through the room like cannon fire. 3 days, he shouted. 3 days is all it takes. If we wait, months will be lost. We must strike now, while the Germans are disorganized, while the opportunity is ours. You talk of caution and coordination, Dwight, but the enemy does not wait. The enemy strikes while we deliberate. Eisenhower's gaze did not waver. His voice remained calm, deliberate, yet imbued with authority. George, your instincts are unparalleled, and your courage unmatched. But I cannot allow audacity to become recklessness. The men under your command trust you, yes, but they also rely on structure, intelligence, and careful planning. Your fire must be guided, not unchecked. If we act hastily, we may gain the city but lose thousands in the process. That is a victory no one can celebrate. Patton's fists clenched, his knuckles white, yet even in his fury there was a glimmer of understanding. He had been tempered by experience, had survived battles that others thought impossible, and yet he knew that Eisenhower's calm assessment carried weight. Still, the fire in him could not be extinguished. Dwight, he said, leaning back slightly, his voice now a mixture of respect and restrained intensity, I understand the need for planning, but opportunity like this doesn't knock twice. The Germans are vulnerable. We can take them before they regroup. Speed is decisive. Hesitation is death. Eisenhower leaned forward, tracing lines on the map with a finger as he spoke. I understand, George, and I do not wish to stifle your momentum. You have the ability to move faster than any man I know. But consider this: logistics, reinforcements, intelligence, civilian safety. These are not just minor details. They are the difference between a victorious charge and a costly disaster. I propose we combine your audacity with structured planning. You will lead the assault, yes, but under a strategy that ensures our success and limits unnecessary loss. Patton's eyes flickered, the fire in them mingling with the spark of concession. He had never been one to cede control easily, yet he respected Eisenhower's wisdom. The room seemed to breathe again as the two men found, however tenuously, common ground. I can work within a plan, Patton said slowly, as long as it does not strangle the momentum. I will lead my men forward, fast and with everything I have. But the plan must allow for bold action, for daring that seizes the initiative. Without that, speed is wasted and the enemy regains control. Eisenhower nodded, a faint smile breaking his otherwise stoic demeanor. Agreed, George. Your brilliance will guide the attack, and my experience will guide the framework. Together, we ensure that the city falls swiftly, decisively, and with minimal loss. The glory will be yours, but so too is the responsibility. Every decision, every maneuver, must be weighed not just for victory, but for the men under your command. Patton's expression softened slightly, though the intensity remained. Responsibility is nothing new to me, Dwight. Every time I lead my men into battle, I bear it. I have done so before, and I will do so again. But you understand, hesitation is the true enemy. We strike, or we watch opportunities slip through our fingers. Eisenhower leaned back, the tension easing slightly but the weight of command ever present. I understand, George, and I trust your instincts. But the war is not won by recklessness alone. It is won by courage guided by wisdom, audacity tempered by strategy. Your boldness is a weapon, but like all weapons, it must be handled with precision, lest it destroy both friend and foe. The room fell into contemplative silence again, each officer reflecting on the gravity of the moment. The distant gunfire, once a background hum, seemed louder now, as though urging them toward action. Outside, the battlefield waited, full of uncertainty and peril, yet ripe with opportunity. Inside, two extraordinary minds, one a whirlwind of daring, the other a steady hand of reason, had begun to forge an alliance, a partnership that could shape the outcome of the war itself. Patton's energy was palpable, his impatience tempered by the realization that Eisenhower's methodical guidance would make his attack more effective. He straightened, the fire in his eyes mingling with a newfound clarity. "Then we do it together," he said. "You guide, I charge. The city falls, and the men survive. That is how we win." Eisenhower allowed a faint nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the trust and mutual respect that had been established. "Yes, George. We win together because we combine audacity with strategy. The city awaits, and we will ensure it falls swiftly and decisively. Prepare your men. We move at dawn." Patton's grin returned, wide and fierce, a reflection of the thrill of battle and the anticipation of glory. "At dawn, Dwight, the city will be ours. I promise you that. The men are ready. The opportunity is here, and nothing will stand in our way." Outside, the world of smoke, fire, and distant echoes of war waited. Inside, a partnership had been forged, one that balanced fire with precision, daring with calculation, courage with responsibility. And in that balance lay the promise of victory, swift, decisive, and unforgettable. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, illuminating the fractured landscape that had become both a battlefield and a proving ground for audacity and strategy. Smoke still curled from distant artillery strikes, mingling with the fog that clung stubbornly to the roads and ravines leading to the city. Patton stood at the forefront of his command post, a figure carved from determination and unyielding ambition. His men moved around him with precision, yet there was an undeniable tension in their movements. They knew the stakes, the danger, and the audacity of the plan they were about to execute. Eisenhower remained behind the lines, in the safety of the temporary headquarters, but his mind was every bit as present on the battlefield. He pored over the maps once more, tracing the routes Patton's divisions would take, calculating supply lines, reinforcements, and potential German counterattacks. His officers moved efficiently, relaying orders, confirming artillery support, and ensuring that every contingency had been considered. Even as he remained physically distant from the chaos, Eisenhower's presence guided the operation, a steady hand balancing the storm that was Patton. Patton's forces moved with an energy that seemed almost supernatural. Tanks rumbled forward like iron behemoths, their tracks tearing through mud and rubble. Infantrymen advanced in coordinated waves, their rifles glinting in the early morning light. Engineers worked feverishly to clear debris and fortify positions as they pushed toward the city. Every man knew that speed was their ally, that hesitation could spell disaster, and that the audacity of their leader demanded nothing less than total commitment. As the first units reached the outskirts of the city, German resistance began to stiffen. Snipers picked off stragglers, machine gun nests raked the streets, and artillery pounded the advancing columns. Yet Patton's strategy, refined under Eisenhower's careful guidance, allowed them to respond with precision. Flanking maneuvers, diversionary attacks, and coordinated artillery strikes kept the enemy off balance. The city was a labyrinth of destruction, yet the Americans moved like a tide of iron and fire, relentless, unstoppable, and terrifying in their momentum. Patton rode along the front lines, his presence electrifying his men, He shouted orders, adjusted positions, and personally assessed weak points in the enemy's defenses. His audacity was infectious, inspiring soldiers to move faster, fight harder, and take risks they might otherwise have avoided. Yet even as he charged ahead, he remained aware of the plan Eisenhower had instilled. Coordination, logistics, and civilian safety remained at the forefront of every decision. This was not a reckless dash, it was a calculated storm. Back at headquarters, Eisenhower monitored the progress with a mix of tension and pride. Reports came in with each passing hour, cities' streets cleared, German defenses crumbling, prisoners taken. Yet each report carried details of casualties, supply shortages, and potential pitfalls. Eisenhower's mind raced, calculating, adjusting, anticipating. He issued new orders, redirected artillery fire, and ensured reinforcements were in position. Even from a distance, his strategic oversight shaped the battlefield, ensuring that Patton's audacity translated into decisive victory rather than unnecessary slaughter. By the second day, the city was partially encircled. German forces, recognizing the speed and precision of the American advance, attempted desperate counterattacks. Tanks barreled down avenues, infantry surged through barricades, and artillery fire intensified. Yet Patton's men, inspired by his leadership and guided by Eisenhower's strategy, repelled every assault. Flanking maneuvers cut off reinforcements, snipers eliminated key targets, and engineers dismantled defensive obstacles with skillful efficiency. The city became a chessboard, each movement deliberate, each action calculated, yet executed with the ferocity of a storm. Patton's presence on the battlefield was magnetic. Soldiers reported later that merely seeing him ride past, helmet tilted, eyes blazing, pistol at the ready, filled them with a courage they had not known. He moved with an unrelenting pace, appearing at critical points at critical moments, always pushing the offensive, always demanding more from both men and machine. Yet even as he thrived in the chaos, he relied on the strategic foundation Eisenhower had laid. Without that balance, his boldness could have led to disaster. The third day dawned with the final assault. German resistance was fragmented but desperate, their remaining forces concentrated in key sectors of the city. Patton's divisions advanced from multiple directions, coordinated with artillery barrages and precise air support. Infantry moved street by street, clearing buildings, securing bridges, and neutralizing fortified positions. Tanks smashed through barricades, their sheer power shattering enemy morale. Engineers diffused booby traps, cleared rubble, and ensured supply lines remained intact. Every movement was a testament to the combined force of audacity and strategy. Patton led the charge personally into the heart of the city. Explosions shook buildings, shrapnel flew through the streets, and smoke and dust choked the air. Yet he moved with purpose, always aware of the broader plan. He directed troops, assessed enemy positions, and made instantaneous tactical decisions that turned potential disasters into victories. Civilians, terrified and desperate, were guided to safety whenever possible, a testament to the discipline Eisenhower had insisted upon. Inside the city's central square, the final pockets of German resistance crumbled. Patton's forces converged, encircling and overwhelming the remaining defenders. Machine guns fell silent, artillery ceased its roar, and a tense quiet descended over the battlefield. Soldiers, exhausted but exhilarated, raised their flags and cheered. Patton stood amidst the chaos, surveying the city he had promised to reclaim in 3 days. His grin was wide, fierce, and uncontainable, a man who had achieved the impossible. Back at headquarters, Eisenhower received reports of the city's fall. He allowed himself a rare smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the audacity and brilliance of the operation. Every calculation, every strategic adjustment, and every risk had paid off. Thousands of lives were preserved by careful planning, and the enemy had been decisively defeated. Yet even in triumph, Eisenhower remained vigilant, issuing orders to secure the city, establish governance, and prevent chaos from taking root. Victory was not just in conquest, it was in stability and the preservation of order. As Patton's men secured the city, he rode through the streets, greeting soldiers, assessing damage, and ensuring that the city remained under control. His presence was a beacon of leadership, courage, and unrelenting energy. Soldiers later recounted how his voice cutting through the smoke and chaos had given them courage when all seemed lost, how his determination inspired them to press forward even in the face of fierce resistance. Eisenhower, observing the aftermath, reflected on the delicate balance that had made this victory possible. Patton's boldness had created the momentum, but it was the careful orchestration, the attention to logistics, and the consideration for human life that had ensured the operation did not descend into catastrophe. History would remember Patton for his audacity, yes, but it would also remember Eisenhower for guiding that fire into disciplined, decisive action. The city, once under enemy control, was now firmly in Allied hands. Streets were cleared, civilians guided to safety, and German prisoners taken under control. Patton's name would be etched into the memory of every soldier who had followed him, yet he knew that the real story was the partnership that had made this possible. The audacity of one man and the wisdom of another converging in a single extraordinary operation. As the sun set over the city, bathing the streets in a golden light tinged with smoke and dust, Eisenhower and Patton met briefly at the command post. There was no fanfare, no grand speeches, just a nod of mutual respect. Eisenhower's calm eyes met Patton's fiery gaze, and in that silent exchange was an understanding that transcended words. Audacity and strategy, when combined, could achieve what seemed impossible. Patton turned to leave, already thinking of the next challenge, the next battle, the next opportunity to strike. Eisenhower remained, observing the city, the troops, and the delicate threads of order and chaos he had managed to weave together. Outside, the battlefield lay quiet, the echo of conflict replaced by the hum of victory and the promise of more challenges to come. History would remember this moment, not just for the capture of a city, but for the lesson it embodied. Courage, when guided by wisdom, could achieve the extraordinary. And in that moment, Patton and Eisenhower had shown the world exactly what that meant.